Hello and welcome to another episode of Mitten Backstage. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for tuning in this week. I'm happy to be chatting today with Morgan Hayner. I met Morgan when I started working for Founders Brewing Company. He was the sound team coordinator and he helped with other projects and booking around the Founders Tap Room. We worked together on a lot of shows, and he himself is also a musician that has an album coming out today. So after you listen to this episode, go check out Morgan Hayner on Bandcamp. If you liked today's conversation and want to support podcasts like these, you can head on over to patreon.com/Dr. Snedeker. There, you can support at different tier levels to get access to exclusive merch, a physical newsletter, early episodes of podcasts, and more. You can also head over to DrSnedeker.com to see everything else that I'm up to around the internet. Thanks again, and feel free to share this with folks that you think would enjoy conversations like these that I'm having with Michigan musicians. All right, let's get right into the conversation with Morgan Hayner.
We did it. It's happening.
It's podcasting.
Podcasting 6.0.
Yeah, it's you never know what's going to happen.
Right. Oh man, how's it going?
Good. Yeah, it feels like a weird opposite day. Like yesterday was super sunny and I was like I had a lot of energy, so I was, doing some stuff and saw a couple of people, and then today I'm still at Third Coast doing some work, but I'm in that like rainy day mode where I'm like, why am I not just, curled up inside?
Right. Yeah. It seems like today I'm like having the opposite day for you. Like yesterday I had no energy, even though it was bright and sunny. I couldn't get anything done. And today, now that it's raining, I'm like, all right, I'm ready to do stuff. Yeah. Let's go. All right. And get this done.
Yeah, trying to get the never-ending projects done.
Right. Yeah, no, they really don't ever end. I was going to work on my deck this week, but now it looks like it's going to rain a bunch.
Yeah, and then I was like, oh, I'm going to go, because I've been, one of the things I picked up over last year just to beat boredom was like, oh, I'm going to go, instead of like going through an automatic washer for my car, I'm just going to like, do it myself and just kill some time with a podcast. And then I did that yesterday, and it had been probably like 3 weeks since I've been. And literally like that evening, it's just like, there's just bird poop all over the car and it's raining today. And I'm like, well, maybe I just won't have nice things.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's good for me because we have all these plants outside and they were desperately thirsty. So we were like watering them every day with a garden hose, and it finally came down to like, all right, we need this super, super bad because we just planted a bunch of wildflowers and a bunch of trees, and it was like, it's either going to rain or they're all going to die. So luckily I think they're all going to make it, but
that's good.
So yeah, sorry, just letting my dog out of the room here.
Oh, you have 3 dogs?
Yeah, I have 3 dogs, and they all like to kind of come in and out of the office because I have over here on my other side, I have a little bed that serves as like a guest bed and couch. And so they constantly like come inside and like jump up on it, and they're pushing the door open. And so he just came back inside right after I let him out of the room.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, hilarious.
Yeah. Just in and out, in and out. My family has 3 small dogs, so it's like you think they're not there, and then suddenly you find them like they've been in the room curled up under a blanket on a couch, and
yeah, right. It's like, funny because
the whole time
these 3 are all like really big and they're hard to miss, but it still happens where you're like, where's the dog? And then you accidentally like step on one. Yeah. I'm like, how did that even happen? You're like 70 pounds. How could I have missed
like,
you?
Think to look at me or like
right, exactly. I'm like, you're the size of a small bicycle. I don't know how I could have missed you.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, no, it's part of the fun of having a home office is your animals can come and go as they please all the time, pretty much. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other benefit is, at least I learned recently with, tax, finally just asking someone like, "Hey, you know how to do taxes? Can you just help?"
right.
And yeah, she was like, "Oh, you have an office, like you rent an office, but you also have a home office." And I'm like, "Yep." It's
Right.
like that's kind of what's been happening.
Right.
And so I think I got, like, even with, like, she kept adding up, like, "Oh, here's, you got this stuff, like this is deductible, this is," and I was like, "Sweet." And then I still only got like $400 back or something.
Oh man.
I'm like, this is great. I love, and then like half of that was to like pay for services. So it's just like,
Mhm.
all right, I did it right, but
Yeah. And you're like, I get like maybe $50. I'm like, don't spend it all in one place.
yeah.
Yeah. I had the same a couple years ago when I was doing independent contracting stuff. The taxes were always like nightmare season,
Yeah. And then like it's, some people are still getting used to, like, it happened recently. Like I sent a, like, when I was doing a gig with Earth Radio, I was like, "Hey, send us a W-9 and we'll take care of payment." And then, I had it set up where I was like, "Okay, there's my name, but then like Earth Radio has an LLC, so here's the LLC name." And then
Yeah.
they were just made it out to me, and I'm like, "No, it's not. It's not what I said." Because that happened last year with, like, I had a check for like, like $1,000 that was all,
Mhm.
looking at the bank, it's like, "Oh, he got paid $1,000, and then he paid this, like, instead of or he transferred it to another account."
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I just got taxed for that. I'm like, but
Ooh,
I didn't. That was the band. I didn't
right.
make any money off of that.
Rough one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets tricky for sure. I think the only time I ever got any money back on my taxes was I did a lot of traveling gigs and I had to download an app on my phone that tracked my mileage, and my mileage was the only thing that saved me from paying a bunch of money.
Yeah. I always forget to, like, I have, like, I think Everlance, and then I think QuickBooks, the self-employed QuickBooks, has a built-in
Mm-hmm.
mileage tracker too. And I keep
Mm-hmm.
forgetting to, like, just like set it up so it's on, and then like at the end of the day, just like, "Oh, okay, I drove to Third Coast and back, or I drove to a gig," or like, just
Mm-hmm.
make a note
Yeah.
of where I'm going. But
Yeah. What was nice about this one, I can't remember what it was called. I think it was called Mile IQ.
oh yeah.
um, it would automatically start logging miles as soon as you got in the car. And then when you were done with your trip, it would pop up and ask you, like, was this a business trip or was this a personal trip? So it became super easy to just go like, all right, business trip. And then it just logs it. And then at the end of the year, you can just export the whole log, and see how many miles you drove for business, which is
Oh
super
yeah.
handy, way easier than like, all right, I got to start the app. All right, I got to press the start button. I got to remember to press the stop button. It was basically like, the GPS is like, you're going over 20 miles an hour. So I know you're going somewhere. And now I'm going to start tracking,
Right.
that kind of thing. So,
Yeah. It's, well, and I think of, like, it's like that habit, and then there's a few other ones just because of not traveling for gigs as much until, this summer is really like, I have a lot of weddings, but
mhm.
um yeah, there's so many little habits that I'm like, "Oh yeah, and I forgot I did this most times, that I would get in a car, like, just to track something, or
Yeah.
remember to write down an expense, or like at least just remember an expense."
Hmm. Yeah. In one of the old bands I was in, several years ago. This was back when smartphones were relatively new, and you could download an app to like turn your receipts into PDFs.
Oh
And
yeah.
my bandmates would like make fun of me because we'd like stop at the gas station and like get a receipt printed out from the gas pump, and then like take a picture of it with my phone, and they'd be like, "Stop it, dad,
Yeah.
band dad." It's annoying. And I was like, it's important.
This is all gonna make sense.
You children don't understand.
You gotta keep the receipts. This is a business expense.
Right, exactly. And I was like, you're all just babies. No, they were actually my age, but still.
Yeah. And yeah, like just I don't know, like some bands are really good about that organization, and I think most people I know are like somewhere in between, not paying attention to it and like wanting to always be on top of it.
Yeah, I definitely want to always be on top of it, but I think like what you were talking about before, it's kind of a process of developing habits, you know, and it's hard to reinforce those like good habits, you know, of like save this, throw this away, or like keep track of this, don't bother with this, you know. In addition to the big things like, you know, I'm going to hire a professional to help me with my tax obligations, or I'm going to hire an accountant. You know, you might think that those things are super dull and boring. But I think most people probably don't understand, at least the general public who goes to a show probably doesn't understand, like, oh, musicians are people who have accountants and like need accountants.
They're not just like your projection of when you played it in a high school band, or that memory from 1986 with this specific song, or
right.
They're human beings.
Right. Like, oh, you probably like if you're let's say you're a small business owner at a show, like you're probably not thinking about like, oh, I wonder if that like bass player uses QuickBooks, or like, I wonder if they have a DBA. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's and I think of that too with like, you know, most of the stuff I watch is YouTube, and it's not, you know, it's not a like, oh, I'm down a flat Earth rabbit hole. It's like just it's like, but I feel like most sentences, if you're like Gen Z and you say that, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. You grew up with YouTube. You're probably an iPad baby, like whatever. And then like if you're above a certain age, it's like, did you go to the Capitol? Like, how much YouTube do you watch? like what are we talking about with how much YouTube? But right. I watch a lot of like just different creators just to get ideas of how to make stuff from your, you know, because so many of them do it from their bedrooms. And there's one that like, you know, on the face of it, it's like, oh, it's two guys playing video games, and there's a million of those people, and you think like, oh, I play video games, that's not that interesting. But they somehow, you know, with their chemistry, they kind of build it as like they're almost like a podcast that plays video games. And then they, you know, they've since branched out to be like, oh, we're going to develop indie games. We're going to make our own touring company so we can book the two bands that we have, like these music projects they work on. And yeah, most people wouldn't look at them and be like, oh, they're like responsible adults. They're just like, oh, there's these two dudes on a couch playing video games.
Right. Yeah, I think you'd be very you'd be very surprised. I think most people would be very surprised how much goes into building a successful like social media content channel, I guess. Yeah. I'm just learning that right now, just with putting the album out and things like that, about really how deep the rabbit hole goes with the whole social media game and the way that you play it. Because I'm realizing like, oh, this is why this is like people's full-time jobs. Like, for instance, like I just got back on Instagram because for some reason, like my personality, I just don't like Instagram as a personal preference of something to like scroll through, you know? And after having like, I had just like not used it for like, I don't know how long, maybe like a year or more. And I came back and I was like, what is all this stuff? I was like, the app totally changed. I'm like, there's reels now. Like, what is the difference between a reel and a Instagram TV?
Yeah.
And I mean, I was like trying to post a video and it showed up as a reel, and I was like, no, that's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
And, and like I have to delete this now and like redo the whole thing. It's crazy. Like, so like from one standpoint, how as a creator or an artist, if you're just playing video games, or if you're like releasing like whole albums worth of material, it's like either way, the social media landscape, it changes so fast that
Yeah.
I feel like the only way I could keep up is if I like hired a teenager to be like, all right, you're doing my TikTok, kid.
Yeah. Kid who spends hours on TikTok and knows how to do it.
Right, exactly. You know,
Yeah.
it's goofy. Because even with little stuff, like knowing the little details, like, okay, so, you know, if you're going to spread something on Facebook, make sure you put the link in the comments and not in the body, because Facebook doesn't like that, you know,
Yeah.
which is silly to me. I mean, I understand, I guess, from a business standpoint why they do that. They want to keep your eyeballs
Right.
focused on their website and their app. Um, but it's still like, okay, if you want to really like reach the most people, it's got to include a picture, and it's got to have the link in the comments, and the text got to be really short, you know.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, oh, I just want to post something that will reach people. I don't know how this goes. I'm getting better at it as I go, you
Right.
know, because I think I'm mostly a social media ignoramus most of the time. Like, but if I'm not putting an album out or working on material, you'll see my Facebook page is just like dumb joke after dumb joke.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's where, like, I'm I'm definitely the kind of person who like would like to write a longer Facebook thing, but I notice, like, if I do that for Earth Radio, where I talk about, like, like, oh, the we played these shows and it's been a while, and like, thanks for coming out, like, even that, getting into like more than a couple sentences, like, it already, it
Hmm.
feels too long, and some people don't interact, and some people don't see it,
Hmm.
and especially here too, I'm going to be working on uh figuring out how to post more about Third Coast in a way that gets people interested as clients, but also engages with the community that likes coming into the studio, whether it's for
Hmm.
events or for whatever.
Hmm.
And I have to, like, be a little more creative with, like, I can't post the same photos of, like, oh, we got this guitar. Do you like it? Do you want to use it on the album you're going to make?
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, like, having a different voice for, like, it's like, okay, I'm representing a company, I'm representing a band, I'm representing me, I'm representing, like,
Hmm.
just all these different mindsets. And then, like, how frequent too, like, I don't know, some people know how to just make multiple posts a day, and it's like, oh, you get a little memes, you get a little video, you get a little audio, you get whatever,
Right.
and then other people, like, they won't post forever, and then they'll post something that gets, like, a huge amount of attention and then disappear.
Yeah, totally. It kind of surprises me when something that I do post does get a decent amount of attention. Um, because I'm just kind of feeling in the dark out there, you know, like
Yeah.
I'm an engineer. I'm not like a social media guru.
Hmm.
Um, so I understand, like, you know, how to set up a studio and how microphones work, but like, um, you know, like people will really dig into their like the stats on their Facebook pages and go like, oh, this got a ton of engagement and this was my audience. And I kind of, for my own personal projects, just for my own personal music, I kind of stopped using a Facebook page. I just use my personal account now, because I realized like the pages, at least as far as musicians go, like if you're not constantly logged in as that page, commenting on other pages, or like constantly putting out content on there, um, then you're kind of dead in the water, you know.
Yeah.
And you
It's
kind of have to leverage your own personal account and your personal friendships in order to get any like real level of traction almost.
Yeah, because it made me reevaluate like how I'm gonna do, because I was doing like streaming every Sunday at 2, doing like some kind of solo keyboard thing, and I've taken the past 3 weeks off because of 1 week was the Earth Radio trip, another was because I had I think another was the Memorial Day weekend, and then this past weekend was just like I spent 4 days baking in the sun and I was really tired. So although I was tired, and so I slept in, but then I had, energy for the other half of the day to just get some stuff done.
Yeah, right. For sure. Yeah, I'm kind of balancing that right now with like, all right, now I need to like take a nap and get some rest and do a bunch of other like normal human stuff. And then like usually nighttime is when I get time to work on music stuff.
Right.
Usually after dark, I have time to sit in my office and like send out a few emails or like export this video, like last night I was like, oh, I don't have any videos on my Instagram yet. Like and then I went to add them to my phone so I could post them to Instagram, which meant I had to grab a USB cable and transfer it from my PC and go through all these steps, but then I finally got through all that and it was like, ooh, wrong file type. So I gotta go back and transcode it again in DaVinci Resolve and then put it back on my phone and then post it. And then I'm like, it's that whole chain of stuff that you forget. I forgot while I was like taking a break from music for a while, like how many small, tiny steps are involved in putting something out,
Yeah, and like I thought of two things with that. I saw what's his name? His Instagram and social handles are Kev on Stage, black comedian. He posted about this lady she was like doing a lip dub TikTok and was like, doing the thing where like you shoot like a couple words and then you change a pose she was like, oh, I'll add sunglasses, click, start another thing, take off the sunglasses, start again, do a trick with her hands to make it look like she was going into a tunnel and then do the trick coming out of the tunnel. And this was all like, in basically real time. She was just doing this lip dub, but using all these techniques to make it look like she's doing certain effects. And I'm like, oh, that's where some people are like, they've leveled up in TikTok where they know how to get certain styles or effects because they've just been messing around and watching all sorts of people try the app.
Right. Yeah. And it's kind of crazy. Like I don't think I'll ever get to that level as a social media user, especially as someone who mostly wants to use social media to, spread the word about my musical projects, and B, maybe read the news and hear about other people's musical projects. You know what I mean? And obviously like I'll get sucked into like dog and cat videos like the other people will, like anybody else would.
Yeah.
But as far as like spending that much time creating content for something like TikTok, which I feel like the audience these days for that is like so specific. You'd be surprised like how specific these like really like intensely famous social media personalities, like their audiences are super tuned in, super specific, and they know exactly what kind of content they want to see. I would be shocked if I found out that a lot of these like famous TikTok channels or other accounts on the internet were really all that accidental. Like this guy went viral on, like he got 1.5 million views with this TikTok video, and you're like,
yeah,
he probably spent a while finding the right TikTok video or like making those, so I don't know. That's a skill in and of itself that as a musician, it's kind of like, do I want to learn that? I may, maybe not. You know, I would rather, I guess, learn other skills, um, and hope that one day, you know, something. It's more like building your own audience slowly and a little bit at a time, right? So like,
Right.
while you don't get a ton of engagement on everything that you're posting, like everything that you do post or every new piece of art that you put out onto the internet, you're slowly building that audience up, you know, and it's more like laying one brick at a time as opposed to like, I don't know what the other analogy would be, like bam, we just have a huge, you know, audience right now.
Yeah, like you somehow like each post is just like a fishing line, and you're just like, I got the big fish. Like this is the one that everyone's
Mm-hmm.
gonna see, and
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing too. I'd say when I was putting this record together and getting ready to put it out, you know, I realized like, yes, it is very important to have like a release plan. Like this is this like our strategy, my tactics here. I'm like, I'm gonna, you know, post this at this time or send this to this person or have this outlet premiere this thing. Um, but when you're doing it all by yourself, when you're like a solo artist, at that point you're just kind of like, I could come up with a release plan, but then this thing won't see the light of day for the next 6 to 10 months, you know,
yeah,
which is a
it's
great way to do it if you're already pretty established. You know, if you're pretty established and you can continue like gigging and based on the reputation that you already have from your last release, then that's awesome, you know. But if you're still up and coming and you're just trying to like, you know, roll out the material so you can actually get those gigs or like get that placement in that blog, then it's more like, all right, I'm just gonna like kind of shotgun this and see what I get, you know, and try to build relationships, I suppose.
yeah, and it's like you know, it's trying to find, I don't know, like the time to even like you want to put out the one thing. Like I think of where Earth Radio's at. Like we put our album out last year,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of had a soft, quiet relaunch of it because
Mm-hmm.
we had some files that were like, I don't know, they were fine, but they weren't like tweaked in the same like levels as the rest of the album, and
Mm-hmm.
we didn't catch it until after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
But in that relaunch, we worked with Anima Media Group to try and like push it out to get playlisted.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a tricky process just because so many playlistable things are like, you know, it's kind of like radio. It's got to be under a certain amount of time, and it's got to fit
Mm-hmm.
a certain aesthetic, and some of Earth Radio's tunes can just jump around genre wise. So it's hard to
Mm-hmm.
like put it on a or put it on a playlist that's like, oh, it's a dance one, or it's a lo-fi hip hop one, or it's, you know,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
no like clear, like, this is what it is.
I can see, I know exactly what you're talking about. And you know, when I started, I just recently found out and started using about Submit Hub, which I think a lot of other musicians are probably hip to by now.
Yeah.
And obviously I didn't want to like start, so Submit Hub, if you're not familiar with it, like basically it is a platform where you submit your music to various blogs, websites for things like review. They're called curators. So curators are people who run blogs and websites, or either that or they have playlists on like Spotify, YouTube. And when I was trying to like search through all of these things that I could submit to, I was like, man, the requirements are very specific. Like, you know, all of these playlists are like lo-fi hip hop, like chill, relaxed vibes that you can just like study to, or they would be like, you know, hard EDM and stuff. And I was like, well, I'm not going to fit into any of those categories. So I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time trying to do that. But then on the other end, you're looking at all the blogs and you can kind of like go by genre, and you can see like, all right, I want to pick like for my music, I'm like, I'm looking for Americana blogs. And a lot of them will like list that as a genre that they like, but then you go listen into their submitted. You can actually find out what they've accepted on Submit Hub and listen to all of it. And I'm listening to all of it, and I was like, wow, this is all like really down tempo, whispery, finger picky sort of folk music. And I'm like, I'm not fitting into there either, you know? And so I think like when I first started using it, the song I was trying to submit got rejected like 10 times in a row from like a bunch of different places. And I was like, all right, I don't really want to waste my time with this too much anymore, because I would rather do it the old fashioned way, the hard way. So, you know, writing up a press release and sending that individually to, you know, people who've either reviewed me before or who I think are more likely to accept, you know, this music into their website and maybe do a little feature on it. You know, I feel like that's the better way to go about it, because at least then you have like an established, you know, if you get into a place, you have a more established relationship, and you come back with another release, let's say a year later, and you go, you know, I really liked what you wrote last time. Like, would you mind taking a look at this and seeing if it'll fit?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's also like, it's that thing too of like, it's like you know, like when you distribute an album, you want it on as many platforms as possible, because you don't know who, you know, like supposedly the planet listens to Spotify, but some people don't have it. Some people are still on Pandora, or like some people still, you know, or they're in like China where there's like probably a different thing because of how stuff works there. And I think of that South Park where Randy Marsh is, you know, trying to expand his weed business, and he gets on a plane and every person on the plane is like, yeah, we're just trying to expand our enterprise in China and get into that market. He's like, that was my idea. Get off the plane. And it's like, we're all trying to get, you know, listens that way. But then the same thing with like, you don't know who's, you know, like my grandpa, he loves radio, and he'll listen to, you know, Blue Lake Public Radio, and you know, some of my Blushing Monk songs will play on Blue Lake, and he'll call me like, I heard your mute sounds good. It's like there's still people who love that way of music consumption, and then there's others who, you know, they don't want to have any physical media, and they just want to stream it, or they want to download it to a device. And then with publications, it's like, okay, I could submit to like Local Spins, which is digital write-ups, but then I could submit to Review, which is like they have a printout, but they also have a website. And then like, but who's reading those? I guess enough people where there's still a business, but you don't really know if your audience is the one reading that, or if like, but you put it out there anyway, because it, you know, it's another, you know, net trying to catch new audience members.
Yeah, it is. And it's also, I mean, when it comes to like websites and any media company with a mostly digital presence, I mean, part of that is getting your project, I guess, like more or less optimized in the search engine. You know, like the more you can get your name or your album out on the internet and written about, the more likely it is that when someone does go to search you, they'll find you or find something interesting or positive about you. You know, and not just like, oh, here's a digital download from a sketchy MP3 website that like steals files and you'll never get paid for, that kind of thing. But I mean, when it comes to submitting online too, it's, I mean, if you do it the old fashioned way, I call it the old fashioned way because it's what people did like 5-10 years ago. But it's still like very fragmented, what each outlet requires, you know? So it's like, all right, send it to this specific email address, and this one website will say like, send it to this email address, but don't follow up at this email address because this is only a submission email address. And it's like, if you want a better chance of getting included, like include a SoundCloud link, because we primarily use SoundCloud in our articles. And I'm like, all right, well, now I got to build a SoundCloud account and like re-upload all the stuff. And but then like the next outlet you go to, it'll be like, you know, you'll see it and you'll be like, okay, cool, this looks like a really good website, and it's like, send a physical CD to this address. I'm like, oh, now I gotta go to the post office. And
Yeah.
you know, and then radio, I mean, radio is a different ball game.
Mm-hmm.
Which, you know, thank goodness for, I guess, stations like YCE that make it easy for
Yes.
people in the community to get themselves heard. You know, that's awesome. But the rest of the radio landscape, if you're not local, or you're just trying to get on a commercial station somewhere, that's a different animal almost. You know, obviously you're not going to make it on the top 40 right away.
Right.
But you might be able to get into one or two commercial stations that don't necessarily play top 40 if you know the station manager or the program director, something like that. That's a whole different beast that, you know, I feel like is a whole job in and of itself. You could spend 40 hours a week just doing that.
Yeah, it's like I thought of two. Yeah, I keep I keep having two things that pop in for just when you said YCE and submission. Like, there's one time I was helping with calls for one of the fund drives. I think it was in this one of the spring fund drives,
Mm-hmm.
which was fun. And this lady calls in, you know, she was just wondering how to submit music, and I was like, oh, it's really easy. Like, you go to WYCE, like type in
Mm-hmm.
WYCE and submit. It's like one of the first links. You click on it, they give you details of how to submit it, you know, digitally, or if you send a physical copy, like they prefer that.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, very clear instructions. And then the rest of the phone call, you know, taking up a line that could be a call for someone wanting to donate.
Right.
She just kept going like, it's like, well, I don't have my album uploaded digitally. And I'm like, okay, well, you could still, you know, if you have CDs, you could rip the CD to a computer and then upload those files to Google Drive or cloud storage and then send a link. And she was like, well, I don't have a computer. I'm like, all right, this, then you could just mail it to, you
Yeah.
know, WICE. And she was like, oh, okay, well, where should I get that information? I'm like, well, you could, you don't have a
Yeah.
computer, but you could look up the, you know, the address. I don't know, a phone book. Like, what do you could come to you could come to the library branch, and it's like right above the West End library branch. It's like, oh, where's that? I'm like, what is this phone call? It's like, it's literally the easiest thing, and you're like making it the hardest thing.
Right.
But there was that, and then like the uh just the like just the nuance of like, yeah, every place is different, every person is different. And that's been like today is, you know, my hope is to start sending out a few emails regarding
Mm-hmm.
booking, just because that's all over the place. Just trying
Mm-hmm.
to book for next year and some
Yeah.
stuff for the fall.
Mm-hmm.
uh it's like, you know, you're sending an email out, you don't know if like, okay, is this dude somebody who like checks his email once a week? Does he check it every morning? Does he hate email? Does he prefer a phone call? Does he want you
Right.
to drive to his house? Like, why? There's no standardized, like, it's like there's 6 standardized things for, you know, every process and
Yeah.
in music. And like some things work, and, you know, like not every band could work. Like I heard about from one of the guys who helped with Greta Van Fleet, like billing
Mm-hmm.
them at a small place, and then they sold that out, and then they built a bigger place and sold that out, and then they built,
Mm-hmm.
you know, St. Andrews and sold that out. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like that story through line is what helped them get more famous, but that doesn't work with every band. And
No.
you need a lot of marketing dollars, and it's,
Yeah.
yeah, there's no like, oh, if you just work, or like, I don't know, like in school, you're like, oh, if I submit this thing and I get good grades, I move to the next grade, and then I move to the next grade, and then I
Yeah.
graduate. It's like, nope.
Yeah.
It's just
Right.
you could just have your, like, we just found out recently that uh for Earth Radio, our album got to this dude. I guess I don't know his full name, but he goes by PK, and
Mm-hmm.
he's done live sound for like and worked in a studio capacity, but mainly live sound for like, like the Roots. I think he went out with Drake, like just a bunch of people, and he happens to live in Michigan and had got a hold of our album, and we don't know how he got it. Like, we didn't send it to him. He's not really friends. I don't know which friend of ours like sent it to him or like knew about it or
right.
And that's, we're gonna end up working with him on the next record, just working with him as a producer. And that's like, kind of how I think of like Hiatus Coyote, where they put out music, and then like James Poyser, who like plays keys with the Roots and has like produced a lot of records and has worked a lot with Erykah Badu. He got their album and then shared it with Erykah, and then she, tweeted it out to all her followers, and that gave them this huge bump. And it's like, that was never part of their business plan.
Right.
Like,
that's so crazy. It's cool how that stuff works that way sometimes.
Yeah.
But you're totally right, and I'm sure that this is the case for your band, but also a bunch of your projects, because I know you have, a varied list of genres that you work in and different projects that you're working on. So what will work for one band will probably work less well for the other band that you're in. It would probably be pretty tough to like Earth Radio has such a unique sound and probably fan base also, that saying like, okay, we're gonna sell out, let's say like Garage Bar, and then we're gonna sell out the Pyramid Scheme, and then we're gonna sell out the Stash or the Intersection. Like, that's probably not necessarily the most realistic path for a band like Earth Radio, because those might also not necessarily be like the right context or the right environment for the sounds you're creating. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's so dependent on I think of like all the things that certain younger artists that I see that they're naturally doing well because they're growing up in this environment. Like, they know that the way they express their artistry is multifaceted. It isn't just like, oh, I have an album and you go and buy it. It's like they work on the aesthetic. They figure out the graphic design presentation of all their internet assets. They figure out like, how to, even how they dress for a photo, like fits an aesthetic that they're trying to communicate. And it's like, so many
for sure.
layers.
There's a lot of layers there, and there is definitely that traditional rock band path to success, like Greta Van Fleet. But there's also other paths to success, in the digital realm, or I've even seen certain artists and bands, and this has been true since like, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, like finding success in like the visual art world. Like, this band is playing this gallery opening, or it's like super connected with all these like really hip visual artists and painters and things like that. I mean, it's so varied. The real key to it is just like, I guess, knowing that you're comfortable with where you're at, or comfortable with where you see yourself going, to spread your art around, so yeah, I mean, for Greta Van Fleet, that's super awesome. For me personally, I don't know that I would be super comfortable playing, to a sold out Intersection crowd with like, I don't think my music fits that vibe. Right. You know what I mean? It's not that kind of party. I guess it's the way to put it, which would make a great album title now that I think about it.
Yeah. It's just not that kind of party.
Right. But, it's a constant, I think, negotiation of figuring out what is the appropriate context for what you're trying to do, and how do you maximize, people's interests in that context.
Yeah, because I imagine too, like, working with Luke and like trying to find bands that fit a certain like in the short term, it's like, okay, we got a rock band, we got a funk band, we got a bluegrass band, but in the long term, it's like the arc of like what types of people are coming through the door to perform, how are they interacting with the staff, with the crowd, with each other, like is it bands kind of have to like understand that they might have great music, but if you're hard to work with, that's going to limit your opportunities in some respects.
Yeah, totally. I mean, as someone who has worked that side of the fence at a larger venue, and acted as somewhat of a, I guess the correct industry term might be like gatekeeper, right. I know for a fact that we did spend a lot of time going like, okay, like how do we get like a diverse, genre wise, kind of like set of artists to play over the next couple of months. But a very big part of our decision making process was like, this band is great, but they're really difficult when they get in the room, either like they'll show up late, or they'll be argumentative, or they'll be too needy, or like in some cases it was like, yeah, your band is awesome, but you cannot run on the bar, like that's rock and roll, but it's super unsafe.
You're held liable for things. It's not like it's just the Wild West of
right. Which like on a certain level, you're like, man, am I getting lame? Like I'm not really cool enough to let people run on the bar. But then you're like, man, I am responsible for a lot of people.
Yep.
Right now, a lot of people who may potentially be imbibing too much, and people who may not make the best decisions in the moment, so that all factors in too. I mean, when you're talking about playing live as an artist, something you really should keep in the back of your head, because that's going back to like I was saying earlier about being band dad. Sometimes like I've had bands in the past where like, a member of the band was in the green room and was like, I really like this glassware, and was like putting glassware in their bag to like take home. And I was like, you guys, we cannot be stealing glassware from
wait, why?
like they're they're gonna come back and clean up the green room and notice that this is missing. Like no, not cool, guys. No, like game over, man, game over.
Yeah, it's like, especially like if they're already, there's things that they're getting that are comped, and like, then, I get at the end of the night, if like, if management like gifts a band, like, oh yeah, go ahead, like you great show, like take some extra beers for the road, or take, here's a shirt, or like, if it's a gift, then that's fine. But it's not an assumption of like, oh yeah, like we'll just take more stuff.
Right. And that's especially true if you're trying to build a reputation, and you don't have an established reputation yet. And you're also, I mean, I think this is true of a lot of professions probably, but as far as the artistic professions go, this is a very particular thing to musicians, which is your conduct in a professional setting where you have to work with a team of other people for a short period of time. You have to work with them for just a day, and you might not see them again for 6 months or maybe ever.
Right.
But especially like you want to make sure that when you leave at the end of the night, they have, even if you didn't play the best show, like if you didn't fill the room, you might still get to come back because you acted professionally and you treated people with respect, and you were kind to the people who were taking care of you, and you showed up on time and filled your time, and didn't like show up with any like major surprises or things like that. And I mean, things happen, mistakes get made sometimes, but people are generally forgiving as long as they understand that you're there to do a good job.
Right.
And you're not there to, just like throw like a banging party for like, your friends,
Yeah.
because a lot of bands will like walk off the stage and feel like, they're like the king of the world because they just got all their friends cheering for them. But, if you like didn't tip your server, or you made a huge mess and didn't clean it up, or you broke a bunch of equipment that you shouldn't have been touching,
Yeah.
that's then you probably won't come back. Not because your
Yeah.
music's bad, your music might be amazing, but like no one wants to work in that environment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially when it's like, yeah, like you said, like, everyone's working with these, like, these moment to moment, like this show we have, this specific team or band in place, and then that's how it's going to be for that day. And
Mm-hmm.
like you don't want to just like like do a string of dates and then on every stop along the way you've made somebody upset. And then suddenly you have 6 places that are like second guessing, like hiring you again.
Right. Yeah. And I will say, as when I was in that position, like we did take second chances on people. Um, when we communicated to them, we thought the night could have gone better. Because like, so and so like seemed like he had way too many beers beforehand, or like this guy was like kind of a jerk to one of our staff, and we'd prefer he didn't do that again. Sometimes people have been come back and they'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened. Like, I'll talk to the band about it. We'll figure this out. And then we might take a second chance,
Right.
on that. But if what you do is egregious enough or annoying enough, we'll be like, yeah, we'll take a pass. Sometimes we have to say that to the band directly. Sometimes we have to say that to their agent. Usually it's easier when you tell it to their agent, because then if a band has a booking agent that they work with and have a personal relationship with, then that booking agent can then explain it to them, and it won't feel maybe so personal coming from
Right.
us. It's not like we just didn't like you. It's like you made our job more difficult than it needed to be.
Yeah. And that's have just working sound. Even when I was at Southridge Church working sound, like the things I always remembered about like certain people that I would see on a regular basis would be like, oh yeah, okay, this guy, I can talk to him. He's not going to vibe me weird. He comes prepared, and, he vocalizes his needs very clearly, and he's communicative, even if, off stage, he's not very sociable. Like,
Mm-hmm.
still having someone be like, oh, this is what I need in my monitors, like very clear, oh, okay, I'll help. They understand that
Mm-hmm.
it's not just like, I need this, where is it? It's just, I need
Yeah.
this. He's finding the channel, he's doing the EQ, he's moving faders, like
Mm-hmm.
like just give me a few seconds.
Yeah. Right. And there's a simple, I hate to say it this way, it makes me sound like a cranky old sound guy, but
Yeah.
like simple thank yous go a long way, or just like treating, the venue staff like they're on your team,
Right.
because it's weird because, I don't think I ever had a reputation for being a cranky sound guy. I know a
Right.
lot of them do. But I don't think that a lot of people on either end, either the audience end or the musician end, can fully appreciate the number of stressors involved. you know like it's kind of like you are the only like link between this person's art and the people who enjoy it
Yep.
for like the next 4 hours.
Yeah.
And like you just really don't want that link to break. You want to do everything in your power to make the night as sound as amazing as you can.
Right.
And when it becomes obvious that people either don't appreciate that or just don't care, it can be kind of frustrating because you're like, man, I'm on your team right now, or at least I'm trying to be,
Yeah.
So I'm sure that you had similar experiences, along the line somewhere where you were just like, man, this is just frustrating, like I'm not mad, I'm not upset, I'm just like frustrated.
Yeah, or usually it's like, and I feel it a lot more too, like working with sound people when I don't have to run sound. When like I think of this past Thursday, just right away getting on the good side of the team in place that was doing the listening lawn, and they were all very patient and friendly and could crack jokes, and so that helped. But just that thought of like yeah, this this person is gonna be like, we could play our best, but if I'm like, if I'm the worst person towards the sound guy, like that's going to be less of an incentive. Like he might still have an incentive as like, oh, I'm going to mix the show to my tastes, or like I'm going to mix it so that it's, the audience gets into it, or like the management's happy with like how things are going as a whole. But, if they're not on your side, then like you're going to get something like, oh, I couldn't really hear the whatever, or like, something goes wrong that gets solved, but it's like, that extra layer of being friendly could have, opened up line of communication, and then like, oh yeah, I did have the bass amp too loud, I'll turn that down. Like, I don't know, everyone working together to make the show better is gonna make it better.
I think of it like the way I think of it now, having done both roles, I guess, musician and sound guy, is when I'm the musician, I think of myself as, the person seated at the table in the restaurant. I don't want to give my server a hard time, because if you're the musician who's constantly like, I need this up, I need this down during the middle of the show, and they're like, okay, now I need some reverb in my monitor, I can't hear the reverb, and then you're like, all right, the monitor sounds really muddy, can you make it brighter? If you're doing that constantly, especially if you're in a situation where you only have one sound person and not two, so if you have a dedicated monitor engineer, that may be acceptable, but if you have one engineer who's doing the front of house and the monitors, then you have to remember, like, you're taking time away from what they could be doing to make you sound great out front. And the analogy I have is like, if you're seated in a restaurant and you keep going like, can you get me a side of ranch, I need extra napkins, like, where's my drink, I ordered a drink like 15 minutes ago. Like, you keep asking your server for more and more things, and they have to keep making more and more trips, and you're making their job more difficult. Then the stuff you really want is going to show up late. Your drink's going to show up late. Your food's going to show up late because you made your server run too much. It's very much the same way when you only have one engineer. They can't do the best job they possibly could because they're too busy focused on making it right for you, which is why it's so important when you show up, for the sound check. When you're at sound check, unless you have a major problem, like, you want to be engaged, you want to be paying attention to, all right, who's checking now, and what does the sound person need from me right now? Does he need me to be quiet and not like be fiddling around with everything? Because you have some of those musicians who are just like playing through the whole sound check,
and you're like, what, just stop for like 10 minutes and we'll be done.
Well, and I've literally had some bands where I had to get on the microphone and tell them, like, all right, everybody, no, stop playing right now, because I'm trying to help the vocalist or something like that, but just like showing up and being present, and sound check time is like, it's the most crucial part of your whole show. If you're not willing to engage with it on a good faith level, it's like being in class, like class is starting, like, everybody be quiet and pay attention. That's just the way I think of it, from an engineer's perspective.
Yeah, it's so well. It'll be interesting to see, like, as things, things are happening again, shows are being booked. Just like what bands like kind of stuck, at least with some of the like the good habits they built prior to everything shutting down. And then which artists like learned and like come back, more improved, or or the ones that didn't realize they were, causing problems. Now they're seeing the, it's going to be like, oh, this year too, not a lot of people responded. It's like, well, how did your shows go the last time? Like, maybe ask someone who wasn't, in the band, or like ask the people like, hey, just curious, like something happened, like why?
Yeah. No, it's a good opportunity to revisit a lot of that, and it will be interesting to see. It'll also be interesting to see what happens to the venues, I think, because much like musicians have reputations, venues also have reputations. I think when we were, working at Founders, there right before the pandemic hit, and that period of time, I think our reputation for production, especially, was really kind of higher than it had ever been. And we took that really seriously, without we weren't being like super hard asses about it or anything. But we almost always just put on a really great show without very many like technical problems, and artists, musicians always left very pleased, or at least for the most part. In fact, we even kept track of that. We had artist satisfaction surveys, and they almost always came back, like 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10. It was very rare that we had a lower scale review. So I don't know how many venues actually go to that length to ask their artists, like, what do you think of your experience here? I wonder, when things open back up, which venues will be left, first of all, because it's unfortunate what has happened to so many of them. But what kind of staff and what kind of atmosphere, what kind of reputation will there be for these places, and the skill and care they put into what they do?
Because the sound was definitely, like, I feel like most bands took engineers for granted, and until they literally had to like route audio themselves, and they're like, how do you get sound from the thing to the computer, or a mixer to a PA, or a like, I think of like Desmond Jones. They invested, they got some grant money, in addition to, like, they use some of their combined stimulus money to get like I think they got an X32 and like a bunch, like a video switcher and like some cameras, and they spent a lot of time like, all right, here's how we route audio for our monitors. Like, now they can show up and have in-ears now, and like they spent a ton of time learning that stuff. And then other people, they might have still had friends that could help walk them through it, and then others, like, they just, they might still take sound guys for granted, because they just, they use their phone, and they didn't even try to route any audio. They're just like, oh well, I'll just do this. And it's now post quarantining and things opening up again, like, which people are going to be at which places. I see a lot of movement of just like people who are gone from those spaces, or like have moved out of the state, and now it's like, who's going to replace these people that like built the reputation for the venue? Like, what?
Like,
they got a lot, a tall order to fill, beyond just like, can you mix a show?
Well, it's much the same way for, I think, the rest of the service industry. I mean, the service industry, people who are longtime food and beverage employees, people with many like years and years and years of serving experience, a back of house experience, front of house experience. Those people, a lot of those people have moved on to new careers. I mean, a lot of them have moved into real estate. A lot of them have moved into, things that were in insurance, things that were a little bit more pandemic proof, where you can work at home. And the people who are now coming back to work service jobs in food and beverage and hospitality, a lot of them are younger kids who don't have that as much experience, and the only people left to train them are the people who really stuck it out. And I think a similar thing may happen with venues, with engineers, sound engineers. You might see a lot of venues with like, kind of like, first time sound engineers, or people who have 1 or 2 years of experience, or maybe like went through a couple years of a college program, that haven't really had their metal tested yet. And I think it's wise for musicians right now, when they go back to these venues, to kind of treat them, give them a little bit of the kid glove treatment. Like, they're still going to be doing their best. Like, they wouldn't be in this if they didn't want to be,
And and like, I forget who I was talking to. They tried to compare like, just on the premise of like musicians who know how to hook up PA equipment. It was like, oh yeah, like we're both the same, like, musicians that did. And I'm like, no, not like maybe 2015 me would agree with you, but like I had to, multiple trainings from different people, and like I had, working at Southridge was a very interesting job, because it was like a battle of like there's this old outdated PA, and the way it's set up in this very large sanctuary was, it made mixing difficult, because you had to kind of like, oh, the board's on a balcony, and the sub is on the middle of the ceiling, and it's just right in your face. But then you go to the lower level, and it's like it feels empty, because everything's so far away from where everyone's listening. And then, there was a solution of like, okay, the person I was working with, they had an extra, PA set up, and they knew how to rig it so that it worked with the main board, and you could have like a mix for the balcony and a mix down on the first floor. And then there were, like having to just constantly like, oh, I'm using the board, and then run downstairs, use the iPad remotely. And just like, in general, just variables of like, a church setting versus like a venue where it's not fixed. You're not doing sound at like, like, oh, I'm doing it at a corporate event where there's one mic source, and you just make sure it doesn't feed back. It's like, oh, this is, each band is different. Some, the Holy Warheads are going to be a way different show than Olivia Mainville. Like, you're going to have to like,
for
adjust
sure.
it. You can't just set it and forget sound. Like, it's always changing. Even when you think you have the mix down, you're still tweaking things like on the fly, and something might have like, oh, this DI box isn't working, and suddenly you have to swap it out. And oh, that's why his volume was so low, because this DI box was broken, and you have to just there's all these little, like, as you're just sitting there playing, like there's all these little things of like, oh, what if I can't really hear him, let's adjust the volume. Like, there's all of that. And then I think of like the last Rake Beer show we did, we had Christian Nickel come out to run sound, because I had done it the first time we did it this year, and that was just a nightmare of like, all right, everything's set up, but I have to keep leaving my keyboard to like make little adjustments on the mixer.
It's very challenging that way. And like I'm thinking about heading into the future, like, musicians are definitely going to have to keep remembering to be, like somewhat kind and forgiving for the people who are doing this work for them. The person that honestly, like, I think is the best example I've seen that at this was the coolest thing I've seen Seth Bernard do ever. So Seth Bernard at Earthwork Harvest Gathering a couple years back, he was playing in they have a separate tent stage that they had just added, and he was playing a set down there, and in the middle of the set, for some reason, kind of the PA turned off, or like somebody like the sound guy like muted some channels, and so the show kind of came to a stop for a little bit, and people started getting restless, and they started shouting out like, come on man, come on. And what Seth did was like he like shut the whole audience down, or he quieted them down for a second, and he was like, all right everybody, how about instead of yelling at him, y'all lend a hand and maybe pull out a flashlight or something so he can see better,
Right.
like how about lending a hand instead of getting on this guy's case. And
Right.
I was like, that's really awesome, that's really cool, and that just kind of shows you what kind of guy he is. But that kind of stuff goes a long way. It goes a long way with the venue staff. It goes a long way with the people, because the venue staff talk to the people who are booking the shows, man. I mean, they report back either formally or informally, and people will learn about what kind of example you're setting up there on the stage.
Yeah. Like, yeah, people remember,
especially now that we're live streaming everything. Like every show's getting live streamed now. Live streaming isn't going away, so people are going to see how you're behaving even if they're not at the show.
Mm-hmm. And they'll be able to like I think of like YouTube, where the community, sometimes it's like, when there's like a bad actor, a bad faith actor, or like some toxic person in general on the platform, yes, there's thousands of people who will still support them because whatever reason they like the person. But then there's the subculture of people who like bring up legitimate concerns, can like timestamp things and be like, yeah, this was a very problematic thing, and if you look at like 3 minutes and 45 seconds, the way he's like talking up to this person is not cool, or that like there's a whole culture of it's not as like sinister as like like it's cancel culture. It's like all the people who have book tours are like, we're being canceled,
right?
But it's people who can like see, they can look at content, and they can they're not just dazzled by the fact that it's like, wow, it's colored pictures moving. Like we're way past the novelty of like, it's live video. Like what is it? It's just
right.
People can just cut right to the chase of like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, or like this person's mean, or this. People are discerning online.
I think far from being a negative aspect of the internet and our current state of pop culture, I think it's actually just a natural consequence of the way we've developed our media ecosystem. It's a natural consequence of on the one hand having so many choices of things to be able to consume, and so many choices of things to entertain you. On the other hand, there's so many ways for you to express how you feel about what you're watching, what you're listening to, who you're reading, on Substack or something. It's only natural that when you add that many choices and you add that many avenues for self-expression, that people are going to band together and say like, what, this guy's actually a bad actor. Like, we don't want this guy in our online community. He does bad things. The things he says are corrosive to our general sense of like morality or ethics. Those are all normal outgrowths of having multiple avenues for content. It's almost, and especially when you have social media algorithms that favor outrage. Like on the right, you'll have like a whole outrage campaign of like, fake disinformation, stop the steal stuff.
Yeah.
And in the center and on the left, you'll have, whole outrage campaigns about a wide variety, a whole host of things. But the fact of the matter is that, our social media companies are major media conglomerates right now, and their algorithms tend to favor outrage as an emotional response because that gets more interaction, that gets more engagement, gets more clicks, gets more ad dollars, so this is the world we built, and there are good things about it and there are bad things about it. But I don't think that saying, cancel culture is bad, I hate woke people, like,
yeah,
that's just lazy thinking, in my opinion.
Yeah, and there's all because it's always like a more nuanced discussion, because some people could be, quote unquote woke with the good intentions, and other people are woke in the sense that they're very performative, and they know the right words to say, they know how to get the attention from certain communities, they know how to use language and media to like get a certain type of attention and then sell against that attention.
Mm-hmm.
I think of like one of the weirdest recent podcast episodes I listened to, the Tim Dillon podcast. He was live at the Miami Bitcoin conference. Like they gave him like a stage, like the last stage panel, and he had on like he had the Winklevoss twins and then Jake Paul to talk about Bitcoin. And like, Jake was also obviously plugging the fact that, he's into doing the whole boxing thing and he's like training and whatever.
Right.
And, his stance is like, he's like, I just want to get the fighters paid more because there's too much money in the UFC going to Dana White. And it's really the fighters who are putting up their time and effort and risking. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, but you're also the guy who's like trying to sell like scam ed courses to like children who want to be influencers. Like,
right.
You're the dude who knows how to like, get attention. And Tim even comments like, he's like, yeah, you want fighters to build their own profile, but you yourself said that there's a huge commitment to training in the sport. Like, you don't just like have a lot of time to develop a social media strategy to like get an audience to then have that audience invest back in whatever you're doing. And Tim was saying like, yeah, you're really good at getting attention, whether it's good or bad. Like Jake Paul gets attention. Usually it's like Jake Paul set a mattress on fire, or like Jake Paul got a bunch of guns confiscated by the FBI in a raid. And it's like, right. It's never like Jake Paul, like, help the guy. It's just like Jake Paul is wilding out. He's 24. He's moved to Puerto Rico, so he doesn't have to pay a lot of taxes. So he's the rich kid abroad, and it's very, very complicated to say like, that it's a more nuanced discussion than just like, oh, they're all wrong. It's like, well, he might be wrong for this reason. They might not be wrong. And this is how it's being, the argument's being presented. It's hard to have those discussions in an Instagram comment thread or something.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost impossible. But I mean, the thing, going back to that term woke or wokeness, I mean, that in the last year or two, maybe more, that particular term, I mean, it is now either used performatively, like you were saying before, there's a performative aspect to it, or it's just a term of denigration. Because I don't think that anybody that I know that sincerely cares about the health and the safety of their neighbors and their community, even uses that word to describe themselves or anyone else. Like, I don't hear anybody like sincerely saying like get woke anymore. Like that's not a thing. We're a couple years beyond that now, like it used to be a term that was used on the left for like, becoming aware of some of the like more heinous atrocities committed by the US government, but now it's just like a term that people on the right to use to be like, oh, you're so, like you want like trans kids in bathrooms, like why does everybody have to be so woke? And like, actually, like they're just kids and I want them to be safe and healthy like any other kid, like but yeah, I mean that whole thing goes on the internet all the time. And the same thing, I think, it happens in our local musical communities too. I mean, there are minor and major scandals that crop up in our local musical communities, and the same dynamic sometimes happens where there's an outrage cycle. There's very little nuanced discussion about what happened, who was in the wrong, who did what, why they did it. You can't get into those details really in a comment thread, because like then you're just going to end up with like, you're going to end up with like Bernie 2020 with a bunch of snake emojis everywhere, and you're like, all right, well, this isn't helping.
This isn't what, this doesn't lead to a solution. It just leads to more, just the same infighting and and it's like, with music, it's like, you can kind of suss out who's like trying to wheel and deal in like a healthy way, and then there's the wheel and deal that's like, it's like you reflect on and you're like, oh, that really didn't benefit me or like what I was working on. It really just benefited the person that I helped with my time and skills and my what sorts of access I can grant people, because that's been a thing playing at the listening room. I just did my last residency gig on the 5th, so 2 days ago, and I thought back to like all the months that I did it. I think every week I had at least one person who wanted to know, like, how do I get in touch with the booking person? Like, hey, could you put in a good word for me for this thing? And it's like, I'm realizing how much more responsibility I have to keep, like not gatekeep in a restrictive way, but in like seeing the people that I want to elevate, that I know are doing the work and doing the right things, and they need that bump, versus like, just giving somebody who I meet on the street, or like someone who's just like, I would love to do this. It's like, cool, but you're so far away from that. And I don't want to have to like tell you that, but I also can't just like, there's only so many times I can say like, Quinn's gonna get back to you. He'll get back to you. Like, I'm not his assistant. Like, I just play there. Like,
well, the same thing, the same thing happened, at Founders, where, I technically wasn't in charge of booking anything, but people would be like, hey, heck, how can I get into Founders? But I think what you brought up is very important to understand, which is you have a responsibility now, since people are coming at you, not to be a gatekeeper in a negative way, but like you're protecting the time of the people who invested their time into you in the first place. Like, you're not just swamping them with requests because you feel like, oh, now it's my duty to like get everybody in here. Like, no, it's not your duty. That's not you don't have an obligation to every single musician that wants to play somewhere, just because you're a musician too. Like you want to be respectful of the people who put their time into you by explaining like, hey, that's not really my area. Like, I'm sure you can find that information on the website, because they have specific policies and procedures in place for a reason, and it's to keep people from being inundated all day in and day out with like personal messages on Facebook, or like people handing out their cell phone numbers. Like no one wants somebody going around handing out your cell phone number to every other person.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to be contacted day and night by people you can't respond to, you know.
Right.
And
Just
some of them might be truly talented, amazing, wonderful human beings, but like you literally wouldn't have time in the day to get back to all of them, you know, or to fit them all in to your schedule.
Yeah. And like just the dance with booking too, just to like I mean, there's the, you know, the band side of it where like I'm having to think about routing again and like what makes sense for like what we're trying to do, like depending on the band, or like what, you know, what
Mm-hmm.
there's especially Michigan, there's only a certain window of time where there's a huge potential to like get a lot of audience members in like the warmer months, and then, you know, you're playing strategically for the winter shows where you're not making as much money overall because you can't do as much traveling because it's trickier, or like, you know, like there's all of that, but then there's, you know, trying to book to the strengths of like, oh, here's what's worked, like, you know, we have certain bands that are definitely coming back because they, you know, they put on a good show, or they, you know, left a good impression. And yeah, it's like the more you're having to sift through like I remember getting an email when we were trying to launch Crooked Tree Creative,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just an email that was like, I have my music ready and it's good to go, and there was no links, no website, like
Yeah.
just nothing. And I'm like, I'm not responding to this because there's no, or in a similar vein of like when people hit me up for projects and they get my name from someone who like highly recommends me, but then there's still like the way they phrase they're wanting to work with me is like, it's like, oh, I want to see if you're good. I want to see if you can do what I need you to do. And it's like, I thought I was given my name was given to you on recommendation. Like, wouldn't you just want to work with me?
Right.
Like, I have people who know what I can do, and you could look at my website and get a taste of
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah,
some of
like
the things that I
I have a
do. And
CV, I have a whole bunch of projects you could hear me on.
yeah, and to like, you know, to think that there's, I don't know, like part of it's like not wanting to come across as like, it's like, go away, like I'm more important than you. It's more like I like at this point it's like, do you want to hire me or do you not want to hire me? I have a lot of reasons you might want to hire me. So
Yeah.
you come to that conclusion, approach me with an offer or like a session or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
it makes more sense than just like, or yeah, like hitting up a venue and just being like, oh yeah, we'd love to play. It's like, okay, who are you? What's your,
Yeah.
you know, do you have a band? Like,
Yeah.
what, this is weird.
Yeah, right, exactly. And well, I think some of that comes, people are somewhat trained to treat um musicians and people they may potentially work with as like shopping for a contractor for your
Mhm.
house. You know, like either some of them might be shopping around for the lowest price, or they might be, they're literally shopping
Yeah.
musicians. And I can't fault them for that because people have been trained to do that, you know.
Right.
But at the same time, um people don't understand, I guess, how it just works differently than another industry does. I mean, it doesn't work
Hmm.
that differently, but when you, people don't understand maybe that you're not just sitting around waiting for people to hit you up. Like you already have professional obligations, you already have a schedule that's
Yeah.
pretty getting pretty full or is already full, and you will have to find the time to be able to do it. And is that a worthwhile use of your time as a professional, or is it something that's going to set you back either financially, or so much of being a musician is based on your reputation, like we were talking about before. Like you're in, if someone hits you up and they're an unknown quantity, you're kind of like, do I want to be professionally associated with someone who I don't know what kind of person they are, like how do they treat the other musicians in their band? Do they pay people well? Do they not pay people well? Like, do they have anything in their backstory that is gonna like look negative upon me now? Because that's something that everybody has to think about now. It's like not every musician is for hire.
Yep.
Yeah. At least not all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think post quarantine pandemic stuff, because it's kind of two things that I think about with like coming back into the concert environment. You have like artists who they know, or well, I guess the two things are audiences and artists both know what they want, I guess, out of things. And audiences are, I guess, a little more nebulous because everyone's got different. It's like I won't go to a show if I have to stand, or like I won't go to a show if it, I'd hate indoors, like I love outdoor concert series, so I only go in the summer, or like
or like I won't go to this particular venue because people talk too much there, and
right.
like I hate that, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's like artists are saying, oh, this is kind of the standard of pay I need to get, like I'm gonna be a little bit more, or they go, oh, I was being too restrictive, let's let's open it up a little bit and try some new venues or ideas. And then audiences, you spend a year like basically just you're at, it's like stay home. It's like, okay, I can get everything delivered that I need. I Netflix, Hulu, I have a million different choices for like types of programming. And then you get back out into the world and it's like, you want that same level of like you somehow people want to go to a place and have the same level of comfort they would at their house.
Yeah.
It's like I need the chairs got to be a certain way. I got to hear certain kind of music. I got to have a certain, aesthetic. I need a certain, beverage in my hand, a certain meal. Like it's now, I don't know, audiences have kind of had the luxury of like, a weird way. It's weird to say luxury in terms of like, staying home to stay healthy, but there's a luxury that comes with like pointing and clicking and you just get instantly what type of thing you want, versus like you go to a show and, I think of the show we did at the Listening Lawn, Brandino's audience is going to have a little bit of a different spin than Earth Radio's, and Earth Radio's is going to be different than Pink Sky. Like it's not like three DJs that are all within the same genre. It's like, oh, okay, you don't know Brandino, but if you want to see Earth Radio, you got to watch him perform and support that before you get Earth Radio or like, Pink Sky at the end. And
yeah. And now all of a sudden, like all of, the various audiences, and we're just, all of us together are just suddenly all negotiating spaces again. You know what I mean? Like we all have to go negotiate space together. We got to relearn how to do that, and we have to relearn how to not get exactly what we want on demand.
Yeah.
And for some people it's extremely exciting and there's a major hunger, I think, to get back out there and see music.
Yeah.
For other people, they may still have the same kind of mindset that they had before, which is like, oh, the show starts too late for me. I can't, it's up past my bedtime, or
right.
Like, I can come for like the first 10 minutes of your set maybe, and then I got to bounce,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, we're all going to be renegotiating that again. I think as things open up, it's going to still be complicated and messy, just like it was last time before the pandemic. So
yeah. And I loved when we did the City Built Brewing show on Friday. That was a lot of, the energy there was like mostly younger people who had been starved for some kind of music or festival environment. And like, it was just a big party in that sense, especially with I feel like Grand Rapids and a lot of Michigan cities have these social zones now. So everyone could just drink all over the place and like stumble in to see a show, stumble in to see this. Like, I think that'll help in the long run, at least getting more people, like if they can wander around with their drinks or like, oh, they go to dinner and then they take a drink and then they finish it before they get to the next bar they want to see music at. Like, it was good to have that kind of loose environment of like, oh, people are coming in and out. It was a big party. And then John Novak was during the Desmond Jones set. He was really good at like, poking fun at like, saying things like, what, you haven't bought band merch in a year and a half? Well, look at that. You could buy some today. What's that? You haven't bought merch at a show in that long? Wow. You should do it today. Like, and the next time.
Yeah.
Just keep buying merch.
Yeah. I think that's cool. I actually had an idea for my own shows. Now that I'm booking a few more of them, which is that I was never great at inventorying my merch, or B, keeping track of it, or C, even selling it. Like, I'm just not good at selling stuff. I am not a salesman, So my idea was, coming back out of the pandemic, like what I kind of want to do, instead of like having my own merch at shows, I kind of want to invite other people, local people that I know that make stuff, to sell their merch at my shows. So like, one of my friends, she just started her own like tie-dye t-shirt business. Like, all right, like, why don't you come set up with me and like, sell some of your tie-dye t-shirts at the show. And if I have any merch, I'll just give away stickers, or, I might sell some CDs, but I'm not going to have like a big old t-shirt display,
right,
behind me, because, I that's just not how, I'm not good at that stuff. Never really have been. I could, I guess, hire somebody to sell the merch for me, but, I don't think, I myself am not that kind of artist that is well branded. I might not ever get there, because I'm just,
right.
unless someone convinces me like this is a great idea and this is going to look awesome, and it's going to do wonders for you. Like, unless someone's willing to convince me that, and that they can do it and I can afford to pay them for that, until that point, like, yeah, I can do some of my own graphic design work and stuff. But I'm not a marketing person. I'm not a salesperson, so why not, instead of trying to get good at something that I might not ever necessarily be great at, like, why don't I just team up with another person who could use the help and just forge relationships that way? I think that might be the way to go, at least for what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, and I see that in the rake beer shows we do. Like this Thursday, we're doing it'll be like Earth Radio improvises music and sounds for the yoga session. And then we do our concert where it's all of our music. And it's like, okay, they're both separate ticketed events and some people go to both. But there's also like, okay, we have our merch. There's a local farm stand that sells their produce. Rake Beer is selling their, merch and drinks and stuff. And then, someone else will come that maybe is paired with the yoga experience, like a health and wellness type thing, or like, it's an invitation, kind of like at festivals in general, where like there's just a bunch of different places to buy.
Yeah, they have tons of
stuff.
different vendors. Yeah, tons of local vendors and cool things like that. I mean, I'm thinking, just for my own personal sanity, like, just, if I like your business, or if I know, like, I would like to focus that on like businesses that are primarily owned by women and people of color that like, you know, make artisanal crafts and stuff. Like, let's have them set up at the show and sell some stuff, you know, because at least then that way my show is not just all about me, you know, because as a solo artist, even though I'm a solo artist, that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. It's a little uncomfortable for the whole focus to be on me. And I know I have my name on t-shirts and stuff, but it's just a little weird, you know, like I would rather be using my platform and my influence to be helping out someone else, at least in a small way, you know? So if you're if you own a very small business, kind of, I guess you could call them micro businesses. If you sell at things like, you know, if you sell crafts, if you sell art, you know, as long as it's something that doesn't have to be regulated by the FDA, you know, like I had a joke one time that instead of selling band merch, I just wanted to like sell my own homemade soups at the show, that I was just going to bring a crock pot.
One bowl of soup, $5.
Right. And I was like, as long as I'm not running afoul of any local health department codes. But no, I mean, like that would have been hilarious. But I think I'd rather use that to help someone else, you know, because I don't necessarily need the merch sales as long as I can negotiate a decent performance fee. Like I know merch sales are a big part of the income stream for a lot of artists. You know, I'm just also not an income stream person. I'm not that person who's like, I got this passive income stream where I'm just making tons of money, you know. Maybe it's just something in my makeup, but like I'd rather just earn those dollars by performing. And the only thing I really want to sell is the music itself, you know, like maybe t-shirts too, but I don't want to sell you a bunch of koozies. I don't want to sell you a bunch of lighters and keychains. You know, I don't want to have to go onto my Facebook page at like 11 in the morning and be like, we got a 25% off sale today on Morgan Hayner t-shirts and keychains. Like, you know, like, sure, there's nothing wrong with that, and I'm not like making fun of anybody in the music world that does that. Obviously, like that is your thing, that is super important for your projects, then you know, by all means go for it, do it. If you're good at it, that's awesome, I'm happy. But for me personally, as a solo person, it's just not where my head's at. You know, my head's in like, how can I write the best songs possible? How can I have like the tightest band that I can, or have a spontaneous, like meaningful experience? You know, it's about making it meaningful for me as much as it is like making a living.
Yeah. And well, and I think too, like having that as the merch idea, I think of shows that I've been to where the standout parts of interacting with the merch booth, like sometimes it's like, oh, the band was really like, you know, like Dillinger Escape Plan. Oh, they're really chill off stage because their whole set was just flying off the walls and playing hard music. But then I think of like this band that used to tour, Last Chance to Reason. They partnered with an indie game developer to like turn their album Level 2 as like use it as a basis for like a rail shooter video game. And at the merch booth, you could sample the album because it hadn't yet come out. You could sample it by playing through like the demo. You'd get like snippets of each song, and you know, like things like that, or bands that were touring internationally, like knowing that they don't want to take home, you know, they don't want to have to pay for merch, or like, you know, like, oh, we're on the last leg of the tour, and they're just like, they're making that decision of like, instead of, you know, trying to nickel and dime on every piece of everything, like we're just going to unload as much merch as we can in the last couple weeks of the tour. And, you know, you get a great deal as a purchaser. Like I remember a band sold like a vinyl with a CD and like a shirt and a poster for like $20 because they were just trying to get rid of so much merch. But at the same time, it was like, you know, for them, it's just more like, oh, more people wearing our shirts, more people sharing the music, more people posting about like, oh, they got the gold vinyl. Like that was one of the things they had. And it's less like it's less about the money you get back from the investment and more of the social aspect of like people came to your show, they had a good time, they they bought merch, whatever the incentive, or they interacted with you at the merch booth, whatever the incentive, or they remember, like, oh, this vendor was so cool. They had, they featured some local farm stand or,
Yeah.
like it's something different than just like, hey, this is what you see on our web store, but just in person.
Right. Well, I think I'm really a fan of those like more creative ideas, and I'm also a fan of the people who like, understand that their audience has an appetite for merch. And I think that's super cool. I think as I get deeper into the solo artist project, if I realized that, I do have a fan base that has an appetite for these things, then I'd be, super willing to go down that path, but it's so interesting. It's an interesting line to navigate for someone who's like, a local regional musician, which is like, yeah, people do want to buy your merch, but I actually end up giving away more merch than I sell,
Right.
Because they're just, people just ask for it, like, man, I really want one of those t-shirts. And I'm just like, have one,
Yeah.
because it does me, it does more for me to build a relationship by doing something nice for folks,
Right.
than it does to be like, yeah, well, the t-shirt's $20, so fork it over. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah, like I think we did that recently. We had one t-shirt of our original Earth Radio design left, at least from, what we had printed. And they were like, I I think they wanted to buy it, but they, for some reason, only had a large bill. And they're like, well, I have this. It's like, do you have change? And it's like, yeah. And then they just, happened to be like, oh, let's make it easy. Like, just give me back 20 and I'll also take this
Mm-hmm.
thing. Or someone who's like, oh, the shirt's 25, but I only have a 20 is like, oh, that's fine. We'll take it. And sometimes that
Mm-hmm.
leads to, the person behind them overhears it and they're like, well, I only have 20. And it's like, fine, we'll just, it's like,
Right.
you don't want to invest an extra $5. We'll just let that shirt go. It's like making those split second decisions of like, how much does it cost? How much did I invest in this? Like, what's the cost benefit to just like lowering the price slightly? Or I remember we tried to do like a huge fire sale of just trying to move certain items, and
Mm-hmm.
I lowered the price to like pay what you want,
Mm-hmm.
and then raised the shipping to like the cost. Basically, it would work out like you pay $1, you're paying $10 for shipping, or
Mm-hmm.
$15 for shipping, and then it works out to pretty much at cost what we paid for the item. And so
Mm-hmm.
some people still didn't want that. Like they were like, well, like, I know you. Can I just like grab it from you and then not pay for shipping and just give you a dollar for a vinyl that was $30 a day ago?
Right.
It's like, I thought, like, hey, support. I don't know, like, what
Yeah.
am I supporting, your vinyl habit, or are you supporting my art?
Right. Yeah. It's like, could you give me $15 shipping to drive it to your house or something?
Yeah.
Like $15 gas money to get it over there and drive it to your house. Yeah.
Yeah, and and I don't mind a deal, but it's also just funny, like, some people, they their way of support is definitely not monetary. It's just it's like they want to have, they want to be able to tell folks about you, but they don't want to,
Yeah.
put direct money into your pockets that can result into it's weird when it's like, like some people where they had an issue with the ticket prices for the listening lawn, because it was like you get a pair of tickets for $70, and it's like, okay, that's, on the higher end of what of most shows that we've done, but it's also like a larger production than just, playing in a backyard. And I think people who came to both shows, the Listening Lawn versus City Built, it's like, okay, City Built was free, but that was the vibe of the it was a converted trailer where like if you're on stage and you can feel it shaking, and like the sound is like as best as it could be for being free, versus like the Listening Lawn where it's like a professional sound company installed, high quality speaker arrays and like mixed everything really well, and it was in a nice outdoor space, and it was comfortable, and it was near a bunch of the convenience of like, oh, I could get dinner and then just go right to my seat, like pretty much kitty corner to the stage, versus a free concert where you're gonna have to wait in a line of 25 people to get a beer, but you're also it's outside, and like it's like the free experience is like, all right, there's less things that there's less barriers to entry, but there might be less conveniences, versus you're paying the premium because you're getting the reciprocation is like you're getting high quality sound, you're getting comfortable space, you're getting like with COVID still lingering, like you're getting some safety precautions in place that can help, if you're that kind of person who is still, understandably like, I'm vaccinated, but I still want to wear a mask, or like I'm still kind of touch and go with big social spaces. Like some people it's gonna take them another year to like get back to the point of being in a room with a lot of people.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm still at the point where I'm fully vaccinated, and my whole family's fully vaccinated now, thankfully. But I'm still at the point where I feel like wearing a mask when I walk into the grocery store, even though I don't have to. I still go to Meijer, and it says on the Meijer door now, it says, fully vaccinated customers do not have to wear a mask. And I'm walking in like, I'm not ready for that yet,
Yeah, it's like, who you want to like. I mean, my brain doesn't do this all the time, but I think, some people have this like altruistic version of humanity, and being in that kind of service role as a musician. It's like, there's a lot of, there's a lot of cynicism that's just like, yeah, people are crazy. Like there's going to be people who they never thought it was real, and they're just walking in without a mask. And that complicates the whole, like, as an employee, I understand if I walk into a restaurant and I see you wearing a mask, it's like, that makes sense because you're dealing with, dozens of people an hour, versus like me just wandering into a store. Like, I might be aware of like certain people around me, but for the most part, it's like in and out, and I don't have to deal with, that nuanced, like, they're not asking you like, hey, like, you're not wearing a mask, are you vaccinated? Like the policy is just like, you just gotta hope that they are.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. It's all honor system at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, Scouts honor. I'm good. I swear.
I'm good to do this.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, I would like to think that most people, I don't know, I see bits and pieces of like different scenes around the country, and like, like Miami Beach is just full on apocalyptic levels of partying. And then, Grand Rapids is like, a lot of people like the patio. And so there's just going to overflow with patio seating. And there's going to be people like, oh, the tin cans firing up again, like get all the college bros and like the young business types, like just throwing down on shots on a Friday night. Like that's all, or like whatever's happening outside of the Bob. Like, I didn't think the Bob was like open, or maybe it was open. And I just saw like, dozens of people just all over the place. And like everyone's just, they're like, it's time to party. And then all the, people behind the scenes are like, it's time to like brace ourselves. Kitchens are getting slammed. Musicians are like having to load in through like crowds of people again. And, sound people are stepping over like all of the drunken masses trying to like mix a show. And
well, yeah, it's like, what do they call it now? It's re-entry anxiety, I guess is the word for it. I'm like, man, my re-entry anxiety is really going through the roof today.
Yeah, I'm especially like last year doing weddings, like, and this year doing weddings. There's, I don't have to interact with a lot of the people in charge all the time. It's usually like a wedding planner or like, other people in the band.
Right.
But yeah, it's like you're going into these environments where a lot of people think it's like, it's a private party. And it's like, yeah, but I don't know you and I don't know where, like, I don't know your family. I don't know anything about anyone. So I can only assume what I could physically see. So I can't like fully trust that something, it's like someone who tells you like, oh yeah, I'm like a chill person. And then like their version of chill is like, I'm relaxed only when things are going my way. And if they're not, I get insane. And it's like, that's not a chill person. It's like it's the same way of everyone's version of like, I don't know. It's like, I'm healthy. It's like, and actually you're actively spreading the disease.
Yeah. Yeah. No joke. Oh, I've always been super healthy. And we're like, yeah, well, eating at Subway doesn't count as actually healthy.
Yeah. It's not, just
it's like we all do it. Like we all do it, but like, no, like that's not cool.
Yeah. No,
that doesn't count.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. Well, and yeah, like we were talking about just the planning of it all. Like that's something I'm like, I'm finally like today, I had talked with Eli last week because we're kind of tag teaming like booking strategy for Earth Radio. And it's like, all right, I have a plan again in place. I just have to start that uphill climb of like reaching out to places, looking at our 2019 calendar, seeing where we played, reaching out to those people. Hey, do you exist? Are you alive? I think of that pyramid scheme status is like, which bands are still alive?
Yeah, right.
Like, yeah,
that's going to be a whole thing. I've been having same issue with, somebody asked me the other day, like, well, what shows are you playing this summer? I'm like, oh, where can you still play shows at? I don't know. I have to figure that out. But
it's like, do you want to hire me? You got a driveway, you got a backyard, you got you got a neighbor with a PA. Like, let's put something together.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to get ready to go do some stuff around the house.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's been a good chunk of time. I didn't want to take up too much of your day.
No, this has been awesome. This has been really cool. I haven't gotten to talk about a lot of these things from a professional standpoint in quite some time. So I was really stoked to be doing it and to have a discussion, on a professional level, music-wise, for the first time in 15 months or so. So I think a lot of really good insights there from you over the last however long it's been. I guess it's been like 2 hours or something like that.
Right.
A lot of good insight, and I really appreciate you allowing me to jump on board and do this with you.
Yeah, no, this is great. And I guess because you have a new album coming out, and where should people like find what you're doing? The big headquarters, the Morgan Hayner digital headquarters, is on Bandcamp. So morganhayner.bandcamp.com.
But the album is called Pocket Knife, and it's coming out on the 11th, so this Friday.
Nice.
It will be available on Spotify and Pandora and Apple Music and all of the major streaming stuff. So you take your pick of the big four or whatever it is. I think it's even going to be on Tidal, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
But so it'll be coming out then. You'll be able to find it there. You can buy it on Bandcamp. And this Friday, I will also be doing an interview with John Sinkovich on Local Spins on YCE. So you'll be able to catch me on that. And then, yeah, I mean, I'll be playing out, doing GR Live in July, on July 15th. And then I'll be doing a live show at North Grove Brewers in Montague in August, so August 18th. And then might have a few more popping up now that things are opening up for sure. I'll have some more things coming down the pipe, but for now, yeah, Bandcamp, Spotify, just type my name in the old Google, and you'll find it. But yeah, just the album's called Pocket Knife, and you'll find it on all those platforms.
Yeah, so for those who are listening to the finished product, which will have come out we're recording this the Monday before the album release. So it'll be today when this airs that the album will be out. So go check it out on all those places. And all that good stuff.
Oh yeah, that'll be great. But yeah, no, thank you so much, Dutcher, for the whole experience. And I've been really digging everything you've been doing with this podcast. I really dug the Band Scamps episode. That was really cool. So yeah, I'm excited to see what more you've got in store. All right, I'll catch you later, my friend.
See ya.
All right.